Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here from Digital Leadership Associates, also the author of the book Social Selling, Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. With me today, I've got Laura Wheeler from Digital Science, and we're going to talk about community.
Hi there.
Creating communities, how to use communities, etc. But before we get into that, Laura, explain to everybody where we can get hold of you.
Sure. First of all, I've also got a copy of your book, so I'm being a bit hot here.
Snap.
And thanks, Tim, for having me. I'm not currently in the Big Brother house like you might suspect I am, but I'm here in the Digital Science headquarters in London. And as Tim just said, my name's Laura Wheeler, and I'm the head of digital communications and community engagement for Digital Science. I'm also an active blogger, and I'm often found discussing issues around women working in science and technology. And you can find my blog on the Huffington Post. And you can also find me online. I'm at Laura Wheeler with an S at the end. Please note the S at the end. So yes, if you want to connect with me, please do. Okay,
cool. So this isn't really a forum for promoting companies and that, but we do, obviously everyone represents somebody. So give me a snapshot about what Digital Science does. Because it actually brings on that, we kind of need to know that for the context of why we need to talk about community.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, just to note, Digital Science is a very interesting business. So there's not very many like they're out there. We're a global technology company, and we serve the academic community. So that in itself is quite unusual. And we invest in a collection of companies that are building tools and technologies that are improving the way that scientists work. So we really are revolutionizing academic processes so that researchers can spend more time actually doing the science. We're actually owned by Holtzbrinck Publishing Group, who are headquartered in Germany. And Holtzbrinck is a huge supporter of science. And they also have a majority stake in Springer Nature, which includes the highly impactful science journal Nature. And at Digital Science, we have a collection of companies under our portfolio, all serving the needs of researchers, universities, publishers, libraries, farmers, and funders. And our companies range from the equivalent of the Google Docs for science writing, to the iTunes for science, the Netflix for science, to robots in the lab. So it's quite cool. And we really are disrupting this academic space with technology, which is quite unusual.
I know that we were talking about this in terms of when we did a call in terms of prep for this, and you said that as an organization, one of the things you wanted to do was change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. We have this big mission, and we're certainly getting there, and we're making steps to do that. And it is often quipped that scientists have much better technology to manage their own personal music collections and their videos on their mobiles than they actually do their scientific endeavours. So we are actually here to change these traditional and often archaic working practices. And I think the thing that we kind of stand out from the crowd is that at Digital Science, we want to know what scientists care and talk about. We want to be part of these conversations, because a huge proportion of our staff are actually ex-scientists. So myself, I'm an ex-biochemist, and our CEO, actually, Daniel Hook, is still even a practicing scientist. So we like to craft our social materials and our campaigns accordingly.
So in terms of scientists, the classic scientist would be somebody in a lab by themselves.
Yeah.
And so how do they get a voice?
Well, I think first of all, we should probably start from the beginning in social media and science. I mean, yes. They're fascinated by it. Do scientists use social media? Yeah. And of course they do. One of our portfolio companies called Imagery actually aims to measure the attention that research and science gets online. And as an example, there were over 14 million online mentions of published research in 2016 alone. And many of these came from social platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Wikipedia. So we do know that scientists are there, and they're using social media to communicate. But the thing for us is, how are they using social media? Yes. I mean, activities that they're carrying out. Nature's journalist Richard Van Noorden actually ran a really interesting survey. I think it was around 3,000 scientists who regularly use social media, and they asked them questions like, what are you using social media for? And this was really revealing to us. We found, for example, that scientists use social media regularly to follow discussions, to discover literature, and to post information about their own work. But they also use social media to find peers to network with, which I think for us is this part of community that we want to really take for us. So knowing how scientists use social media is a great way for us to tap into their activities and to use social media to build our own community.
Yeah, one of the things that you said was saying that in the past, what happened was that scientists were in effect were alone in the lab, and they would create some research and then it would get published. And now what you're seeing is that people are actually publishing the research online and on social media, and in a way there's a crowdsourcing going on in terms of the, we're not publishing yet, it's pre-published. What do people think? Let's get some comments, let's get a debate and a discussion going before they actually publish the research. And this is taking place because social media allows us to do that and scale globally.
Yeah, and it's having all sorts of revolutionary impacts to science, because it's giving scientists an opportunity, even sometimes before they've gone through these traditional academic publishing routes like peer review and then getting published, to discuss their science even pre-publishing. So it's quite an interesting field. And yes, as you've just mentioned, now scientists are not so siloed. They can talk to labs in Australia in real time. If you're based in London, social media is opening up this new chain, and it's also helping to progress science. And I think that's what we're trying to tap into, really.
So what's a community, Laura? What explain to people that are watching what a community is.
Well, I guess you can define a community in many ways, but I'd like to say that a community is often defined as this interconnected group of people who are all participating in something together. And community members often also have different roles, but all collectively work together to influence each other. And I guess humans have always naturally gathered in communities as long as history records. Hunter-gatherers, for example, would congregate into tribes. I think you mentioned this bit in your book.
I do.
And together they work together to farm, to hunt and to fish. And this collaboration is a huge part of human success. And I guess today is no different. Social media platforms are just another way to connect, but with much further reaching communities, because effectively geographic constraints no longer are removed. So collaboration is a huge part of that. And I guess the concept is transferable from, today's communities are much larger than the comparable smaller tribes, but I'd say the concept is still there. So again, in tribes, you would have people that are better at certain things, and you also have this in social media. You have, for example, people who are good at making introductions, and some people that are better at spreading news. So I think for us, defining what a community means to you enables you to understand your community more. And of course, again, I think referencing your book, the more personalized the messages, the less rejection you get. So I think understanding your community is a good baseline to kickstart your social media activities.
And do you see that community provides loyalty to brand?
Yeah, I mean, loyalty within your community absolutely does. But I just want to qualify this here, that takes time, and you don't just get that overnight. So one way of doing that is by understanding your community. And I think that's where you start. So however you qualify social communities, it might be slightly different. You can use certain kind of metrics to get to understand them more. And naturally, in any community, you might look at things like demographics, the names of people in your community, ages, the gender, their interests. But the nature of social media now allows us to evaluate members of our community by things like who are they in relationships with, what are their behaviors, what are their profiles like, what are their profile pictures like even, what do they list as their interests and their bios. So we can use this information really accurately to drive and target campaigns. And this also helps identify influencers. And these are the people that will end up being loyal to your brand. And often these people have their own engaged audiences, and influencers have their own role in the community, just like I guess how a hunter-gatherer might have the chief of the tribe. So that your social influencer is who you want to target and who you want to engage with. But yes, it takes.
And so this all sounds really good, but what's the benefits for a brand or yourself in terms of community?
Sorry, Tim, I missed you there.
Okay, so what's the benefit?
Right, a benefit, there are so many. So there is so much noise on social media. Hopefully you found this video by filtering out the noise because you follow Tim or you follow me online. And having a loyal community or a loyal following means the difference between an ever-growing social fan base and having your platform fade into the social media noise. So it's the difference between carrying your own torch versus other people having carrying the torch for you. So nurturing this loyalty, if you can, is incredibly important. And also, you need to give what you get in order to benefit from a community. I like to use the example of Airbnb because I think this is just a fantastic example of how, 20 years ago, saying to someone that they were going to stay in someone's house in another part of the country with people they've never met, it would just never happen. But you trust recommendations left by other people, and in turn, you leave your recommendations. So this giving and this receiving on social media is really important for communities to develop. So I guess you could call this almost a new social responsibility in itself. And eventually you'll have your own online and engaged tribe sharing your news for you to their networks and to your networks. And I mean, if you'd like me to, I can go into a bit more of the benefits of this, if you like.
Yeah, it'd be really useful, yeah.
So I think what we've seen by building communities around researchers and academics, and these are obviously quite thoughtful groups, is that we have, of course, improved brand awareness. Now, how do you measure that? That's where some of it, I guess, is fairly intangible. But if you go to talk to someone at a conference and they've heard of you already, you're building your brand awareness. Improved reputation. I think this is incredibly important, especially when you're asking people to trust you with their science data. I mean, that's a huge amount of trust. So you need to have a good reputation in order to get these customers that are willing to take you on and trust you. So building a community can have huge implications to this improved reputation. Having big communities and engaged communities is also very good for lead nurturing. So you can use your communities as a way of nurturing these leads and talking to them and influencing them very softly. It's a really good way to do that. And also to find your advocates. Who are the people talking about you? Who are the people using your tools, your software? Who's talking about you? And engaging with these and building on that advocacy can be really useful. And doing this in the right way, I think, can have a massive advantage over your competitors too.
And when we talk in terms of preparing this, we talk about how you engage with the communities. Because how is it that we're taking siloed scientists, building a community, and then using that as an organization or working with that? That seems like a big ask to me. Yeah,
it is. I think when we discussed last, we talked a little bit about how for us, we're engaging with a highly educated audience. So as I mentioned before, trust is obviously one of these. Trust is crucial to that. But being an expert helps. So when we're sharing content on social media, we want to be the expert. We know exactly what we're talking about because we've all been there ourselves. We like to teach our communities new things. So often if you've got new and interesting things that perhaps they might not know, we like to use that as a way of drawing in. And also that's a good chance also for people within our community to share to their networks. We also share unique data. So we have a lot of data from our company. So we like to use that as a way. We have data and statistics and facts that no one else has. So that's often a good way to generate conversation. We also offer opinions. I mean, we're not too controversial, but we have an opinion. So we're not afraid to have our own voice. And I think that's quite crucial in techniques with kind of challenging communities, is that we're not afraid to have our own voice. And we engage and we ask questions. Asking questions means that we care about our community. And we really do. We really care about what scientists and academics think because we're serving them. So we need to understand them. We need to know what makes them tick. We need to know what they enjoy. We need to know what they don't enjoy. So for us, asking questions is a really good way to do that. And then I think probably finally, keeping appraised of the news and current events. That's really a good way. And social media is a great place for this. The siloed researcher in the lab now has this big forum, a place to discuss and engage and be part of a wider global community. And this is powerful. And this, of course, can be applied to other fields too. It's not just academics and science that this applies to. I mean, I think these kind of tips and techniques can certainly be applied to all sorts of other industries.
And you get people engaging, even though when you're asking the questions and you get they answer you as well, do they?
Yeah, often. And what comes from that has sometimes generated further blog content and further discussion. So we do find that this has a viral impact almost.
Right. Okay. And you definitely see this applying to other brands, and you recommend people actually look into using this.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not just scientists who are highly educated. So, I would say this applies to any particular community that you're looking to develop. I think these techniques are quite a good way to build any community. But I think there's also this underlying, you should set your scene, and as I discussed earlier, learn more about your community first before you start trying to apply these techniques. I think really understanding your community and then gradually building that loyalty is where you should start. Yes.
And do you have any examples of where you've, let's put this into practice, where we've got siloed scientists, and you built the trust, and you've built discussion with them, you built them into community, and then something happens and you say, well, how can we take all these people that are siloed and do something for good? Do you have an example of that?
Actually, yes.
Excellent.
I do also have lots of examples, but I think a really good example to draw on would be, and drawing on real engagement as well, I think, which is quite key here. We found that our community were really talking about Brexit. I mean, our news feeds were filled with information about Brexit, and the impact that it would have on science specifically. And back in May 2016, we actually published a data-led report which showed us how universities, industry, and not-for-profit organisations in the UK actually risked to lose annual EU research funding. I think it was to the tune of £1 billion if the public voted Brexit.
Yes.
Actually, have a copy of the report here. It's free.
There we go.
Download.
And where can people find that?
You can find it on Figshare, which is a digital online data repository for academic research. We make everything open, so there's no paywalls or anything. You can download it and you can use the data accordingly. And it caused quite a stir, this report. And within a week, it was covered in all major outlets in the UK and around the world. Funnily enough, we ended up on the front page of the Financial Times, in the Guardian, the Economist, Times Higher Education. Our chief scientist actually even was on BBC Newsnight and the Sunday Politics show to talk about this consequence. And the report's been downloaded thousands of times. And this £1 billion statistic was highlighted and quoted widely around the world. And then Brexit happened.
Yes.
We were on there with our Twitter accounts. And obviously, leave was quite an unexpected and undesirable result for the academic community. So to harness these conversations online and give scientists the voice, give these academic researchers who were going to Twitter and airing their views and airing their opinions, we wanted to give them that opportunity, and totally in an altruistic way. I mean, we were making this report open to anyone.
Yes.
We care about the science community. And we came up with a hashtag Brexit Science. And you can now use that now. I urge you to go and take a look at some of the conversations. And we use that to invite scientists to share their thoughts and to share their concerns around Brexit and the implications that Brexit would have to science. And it still is an incredibly popular way of sharing for scientists and academics and researchers to discuss the implications of Brexit, which is still ongoing, as I'm sure for any UK viewers will know. And to date, we've had, I think, over 1,000 individuals use this hashtag, and we've had reach of more than 10 million. And it's where all the BBC journalists were using to share their coverage as well on Brexit science discussions. So I think this is a really good example of how we've tried to tap in and give academics and give researchers a voice.
Okay, and that's interesting, because quite often we hear about this is what we're doing on social and this is what we're doing offline. But what you've actually done is that you've actually brought the two together. So you've brought the documentation, the research, and you're having a conversation online.
Yeah, and we were absolutely responsive, and we were there, especially when people were asking us specifics about the data that we produced.
Okay, so you were really engaging online at the same time.
Yeah, and it wasn't just our community manager doing it. It was also our staff members. So as much as our CEO was getting as involved as our community manager was, everyone was getting involved. So it's because it's something that's incredibly passionate, because we're all ex-researchers. We're working in an industry that's going to be really highly impacted by something as political as Brexiting. So for us, it was a campaign that we used to tap into our communities, but for kind of this altruistic purpose.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. Is there anything else you want to explain or share with people in terms of the communities, using communities as a way of bringing people together, giving them a voice, and scaling up and things like that? I mean, because it's just a great example of that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've really learned from this is that being salesy doesn't really work if you're trying to get people to talk. So right. The approach that you need to take is often most successful when it's really genuine. So
yes.
Talk to your staff members, use your staff members. I mean, I'm happy to talk a little bit about staff advocacy as well, if you'd like. But
yeah, let's do that.
Staff advocacy is a great way in order to do this, because if you've got experts in your in your company, you should be using them as the people that are talking on your behalf. And you get much more engagement with a human than you do a brand anyway. So it seems to be quite an effective approach.
Yeah, it always amazes me on Twitter how people always insist on putting an emblem or some sort of logo. Yeah. Quite often because I don't want to put my face, and it's like you will get twice as much engagement by having a photo
yeah.
of an individual than you will do with a brand.
Yeah, it's the same as well with sharing content on social media. If you add an image to it, you get around 68% more engagement. So yes. You need to kind of use imagery to your benefit, I think, when you're planning your social media activities.
Mm. And I think that often what we find is that we kind of lose sight of the fact that we can bring people together in community.
Mm.
And I mean, I've got a whole chapter in my book about how the power of community.
Yeah.
And if we look at things like the Pepsi ad that ran recently, and the way that, in effect, an informal community basically rose up against it.
Yeah.
Now, on social media, we always have a storm in a teacup every day. There's one without fail. But there could be brands can actually use that a way positively to actually get people to support them as a brand. Like you tend to find the betting sites where they actually become destinations. What's a betting site going to sell? Well, a bet. Well, we know that.
Yeah.
But actually, they're magnificent. Actually, they become destinations for people to want to go because they want to join in whatever today's joke is.
Yeah, yeah, and I think betting companies like, for example, Paddy Power do a really great job on social media.
Yes,
and even if you're not a person that regularly bets, you might follow them online because they're funny. And then when it comes to the chance that you do want to take a bet, say, for example, quite often people that don't bet, I think
the Grand National or something like that.
Just about to use that. That's one of the best examples. I think 80% of people who make a bet on the Grand National don't actually usually bet regularly. So, and then if they've been at some point have watched or heard or seen something that Paddy Power has done on social media, their name is the first name that comes to them, and they tend to go off and use them. I think brands like betting, I think Oreo brand does quite a good job of social media engagement by encouraging their community to get involved in humanizing Oreos by designing new Oreos. I always like that to give as an example. I think Tesco is another good example of an account that uses humor, that utilizes humor. We do try to be funny because scientists are funny. So we do try to do that too. And we've run before in the past competitions for the best science joke and things like that. So there is a way of using humor to tap into communities.
Yeah, we wanted to be, we didn't want to, because we're quite often B2B, and B2B can in fact be very dull.
Yeah.
And so we actually hired a person with B2C background to do our community work, because actually we don't want to be boring.
Yeah.
And we want the engagement, and we want somebody to write in a chatty, engaging style rather than this sort of, the sort of thing that you'd write to your manager in an email type style.
And I think tone of voice is always really important. I mean, it's bordering. You don't want to necessarily border on colloquial, but you can use language in a way that's friendly and enticing rather than boring and dull. So, hello, we have a new report, please download it here, to something else that perhaps is more engaging, and using images as well.
And that's where we in terms of getting the employees engaged, and I mean, I don't know if you trained them, but certainly in most cases, in organizations that I know, the employees are actually completely terrified of using social media through work, because they've been told, if you get it wrong, we're going to fire you.
Yeah. Okay.
So the first thing they do is say, well, I'm not going to do it then.
Yeah. And often that's why you see a lot of people disclaimer that their opinions are their own, not of their companies. So at Digital Science, we do offer training as and when someone come to us. But one of the things that we do very well, and almost as part of an onboarding process, is we identify people that are socially savvy, is what I like to call them.
Okay.
And it's these people that we use to talk about our news, and they have a better understanding as well of this of our news and of our data and of all the interesting things that they're doing. And we share their content too. And I think this is a really good way of building our networks and growing what we're doing as well. Staff advocacy, I feel, should start from the very first day they walk into your company.
Absolutely.
We incentivize staff advocacy. We try to encourage staff advocacy. We even made our own social media guidelines and added it into everyone's job contracts, that you're allowed to use social media during work hours, because we want to encourage social media.
That's fantastic.
And I think we're probably quite forward thinking with this. I mean, this was put into play about 4 years ago. So we really are kind of using this staff advocacy piece as and people call me the social media police as well, because I also do tell people off.
Well, yes, there's a, I don't know if you've ever seen the film Spinal Tap.
No.
It's about a rock band that does tours. Anyway, there's a quote on it that somebody says that there's a very thin line between being clever and stupid.
That's true. Yeah.
And I think sometimes in social media that's often the case.
Yeah, agree. And you can't take it back. Well, you can take it back, but it's hard to once it's out there.
Yes.
And one of the things I've always said is that, especially, for example, working in an industry that's publishing content, publishing goes through so many different iterations. It goes through edits after edits, and then sometimes it might go through a formal peer review and then it will get published. Whereas a tweet goes out immediately, real time, to the world. It's open to the world. So you do need to also think about what you're posting out there and be considerate. And that does come with offering the right training to staff members. I do give a workshop actually where I go through some of the bad examples of what people have put onto social media, not to scare staff off it too much, but just to give them an understanding that there can be downsides also to social media.
Yes. Good. That's been excellent. Laura, it's been really interesting talking to you about communities, because it's not actually an easy subject, I find, to explain to people. Yeah. So remind everybody again where people can get hold of you.
I'm at Laura Wheeler with an S online everywhere. So please get in touch with me there.
Okay, fantastic. Laura, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.